Okay, so we're going to talk about the stop and frisk policy and how it affected different ethnicities in New York. So you can read about the policy by looking at the prison policy stop and frisk page. It'll talk a little bit about it. There are similar policies or were similar policies in various other states, but the data is much more publicly available for New York. Specifically, the data is available in raw form for a lot of different places, but not analyzed as widely. So, also a couple of notes about this data. I had to combine some pieces of information. So, the data is not completely accurate. It's close enough, but one set of data was Black or Hispanic, another was Black and Hispanic, or Black or Latinx. So it's not perfect, but it should give you a pretty good idea of what's going on working with the data. So first, we're going to want the total population of New York, which I already have in this question. So let me restart. When you have a table like this that you are asked to fill out, the first thing you're going to do with it is fill it out with all of your known information. From there, you can go ahead and get the rest of the information. So in this table, we already know that the total population for New York is 8,175,133. We know that the Black and Latinx population comprised 42.7%. And that the white population comprised 32.1% of the population. We also know that all of New York comprises 100% of the population of New York. So now we just need to use this information to find out how many Black or Latinx and how many white people are in New York. So the first thing we're going to do is take 42.7%, and that is 42.7 per 100, and we're going to multiply that by 8,175,133. And when we do that, we are going to get approximately 3,490,781 people. Now, this is approximate because it would continue to round, and specifically our decimal, our percent here, is only accurate to 3 significant figures. So we are going to want to round our final answer to 3 significant figures. So our final answer will actually be 3,490,000. There we go. So we're going to do the same thing with the white population. We want 32.1% is 32.1 per 100 times 8,175,133. And this is going to yield us $2,624,217 people approximately. That decimal keeps going again, but we don't care because we know that we need to round it to 3 sig figs again. So this is going to get us, since this 4 rounds down, this is going to get us 2,620,000. I'm just going to write that here. 2,620,000 white people in New York. 3,490,000, Black people, Black or Latinx people in New York. And again, we're slightly overcounting Black or Latinx people because we've added the number of Black people to the number of Latinx people, where there could be some overlap of people who identify as both Black and Latinx. So now we want to use this information, or use the information on our third resource in our sources and our math to fill out the chart below. So we're going to figure out what we can find in our third resource first. And then we're going to do the math to figure out the rest. So the total number of people affected by stop and frisk, the total number of Black and or Latinx people are 574,483 people. Total number of white people affected is 61,804. We're also going to go ahead and now we'll do this. Okay. So, so the percent of the population, the percent of the Black or Latinx population that has been affected by stop and frisk is going to be 574,483 out of 3,490,000. And so we're going to divide that out, and that's going to give us a decimal, which is going to be approximately 0.165. I've already rounded that for your significant figures because we still want 3 significant figures due to this 349 here. And then this converts to our percent. This is our number we want per 100, which means we want to multiply this number that is currently per 1 by 100, and we get 16.5% of the Black or Latin and or Latinx population has been affected by stop and frisk. This is overcounting again for another reason, because particular members of the Black and or Latinx population could have been stopped multiple times. This is just like in our prison policy one, where we're saying 16.5% have been affected, but that's not completely accurate because, again, the same person getting stopped multiple times gets counted as individual people. Let's do this again for our white population. We need 61,804 people out of a total population of 2,620,000. Gets us, rounded for sig figs, 0.0236 out of 1. Okay, now if we want percent, we need it to be out of 100, and so we're going to convert that to 2.3 0.36% of the white population has been affected by stop and frisk. Okay, so our use of force, our total numbers we're going to have gotten from our resource, and that is 23% of those that were stopped in the stop and frisk population had experienced a use of force. So 23%, we'll put that down here in use of force rate, of people stopped experienced a use of force in the Black and Latinx population. In the white population, only 16% of those stopped experienced a use of force. So in the Black population, 23%, Black and Latinx, population, 23% of this 574,000 people experienced a use of force. Remember, that's 23 per 100 times 574,483. And rounded for significant figures, rounded down to 2 significant figures, this gets us 130,000 people who experienced a use of force out of the Black population, Black and Latinx population. For our white population, we're going to look at 16%, which means 16 per 100 times 61,804. That yields us, accounting for 2 significant figures, 4,200 white people experienced a use of force due to stop and frisk. So we're going to look at our arrest rate now. Our arrest rate is found in the resource that's linked. So for Black and Hispanic people, the arrest rate was 5.9%. For white people, the arrest rate was 6.8%. Oops, I wrote those in the wrong place, but we'll need them up there too. Okay, so 5.9% is 5.9 per 100 times the number of people that were stopped and frisked, which is 574,483. We multiply that out and account for significant figures, and we get 34,000 people, Black or Latinx people, were arrested due to the stop and frisk policy. For white people, 6.8 per 100 times the 61,804 white people who were stopped, and we get 1,200 people were arrested. White people were arrested as a result of stop and frisk. So now our weapons found rate is 1.1% of stop and frisks found a weapon on a Black or Latinx person, and 1.9% found a weapon on white people. Again, these numbers are available in that resource that you were supposed to read. So that means 1.1 per 100 of Black or Latinx people stopped, which is 574,483 had a weapon found on them. With our significant figures, this turns out to be 6,300 Black or Latinx people had a weapon found on them. So for the white population, 1.9 out of 100 white people stopped had a weapon. We multiply this by the 61,804 white people that were stopped, and we find, accounting for significant figures, that 1,200 white people had a weapon found upon them with stop and frisk. So, why do you think the arrest rates and the weapons found rate were higher for white people who were stopped? This is a loaded question. There's a lot of reasons for this. You could use this to argue that white folk more commonly had weapons on them, that white people are the more dangerous population in this system. But statistically, what it comes down to is that if you look at the article, a higher percentage of the people that were stopped just because the officer wanted to stop them were Black and Latinx, whereas white people were more likely to be stopped for cause, like someone called and reported suspicious activity, things like that, and it was a radio call that the police officers were sent to respond to. So right there, you have a really good explanation for why more of the white people had weapons on them or led to an arrest. And that's because more of them were as a result of suspicious activity. It's still a problem because even with that use, the use of force is still considerably lower on the white folk that are stopped. So you would think that if more of them were actually guilty of the crime, the use of force would still be higher. The use of force is alarming no matter what, because that means if only 6.8% or 5.9% of the people stopped were arrested, and 16% and 23% of those people had a use of force applied to them, that means an awful lot of people who had no arrestable offense had uses of force upon them, which is rather alarming. So that's not something to be discussed lightly or used lightly. Why is analyzing this data important? Well, you can use anecdotes and you can use, well, it happened to this one guy, all you want, and that still leads towards situations like, well, we don't know the full story. And it's true in every individual circumstance of what happens. There's always an argument to be made that we didn't know the full story. We didn't know the history. When video evidence is supplied, people are always going to say, well, we don't know what happened before the video started rolling. And that's completely true. I try to always keep an open mind, although that's getting harder for me to do as we get more and more evidence and more of a light is shined upon things. But the thing is if you have hard data, if your data shows that people are being disproportionately stopped, if the data shows that people are being disproportionately having use of force applied to them, and if the data shows that of the people who are being stopped, such a few number of them really have arrestable offenses. And you can clearly show that a large number of people had their lives impacted for absolutely no cause, and that this is eroding the trust in our policies and police force, then we can show that there's a violation of rights, and we can do something about that. The analysis of this data is absolutely what allowed the lawsuits to be brought against the state of New York that eventually ended this policy. That's really important in doing things, is you can argue emotionally and that gets a crowd behind you, but arguing with data is what finally makes policy change happen for those who really need to see hard numbers. So that's all for this one. We'll continue to look at the impacts that data can have on public policy as we go through all of these lessons. But I want you to keep it in mind even when it's not being asked explicitly.